Enemy Warnings. This is Daniel Vallis from InformedChristians.com, a website ministry devoted to discerning current events from a Christian perspective. Today we're going to review and look at a lot of the enemy warnings that have happened very recently that we need to pay attention to and take note of the increase in frequency and intensity. This is just a watch. It's not a prediction. I'm really just showing you what has already happened, and we can expect that probably more of the same will happen in the future. But this is just a watch, not a prediction. The Bible calls us to be sober, to be level-headed, clear-minded, focused, not distracted, and to be vigilant, and to watch, and to take heed to what we're supposed to be doing in these perilous times. I've partly updated my timeline, so I'm going to review some of the material that we've covered over the past few days and also some new material today. Over the weekend, the world leaders gathered together in Turkey for the G20 summit. This definitely called to mind some of the imagery that we've been looking at on the cover of the magazine. In one way, you could say that they're reuniting. This reunion is almost mentioned and pointed to on the cover too as well, which is very interesting because it's right in the time frame of all the other things happening too. So this needs to catch our attention also. But there is another amazing tell in there too. On the 15th, a live feed of the reception stage in Turkey captured 3 stray cats wandering around and sniffing the flowers in the reception hall before taking off. And security just kind of brushed it off like, oh, they just kind of wandered in there. No, this was not accidental. They did not just wander in there. When you have 20 of the world leaders somewhere, you just don't let even one stray cat wander in there. And even some of the articles were talking about how security experts, they know to be on the lookout for various animals and stuff because you can do all sorts of trick them out with eavesdropping materials, bombs, explosive, even small animals. This was very deliberate. They were able to cover it up, though, and kind of brush it off to the public because Turkey is known for having many stray cats, and it's even nicknamed Constantinople. But this was not accidental, not with this many world leaders there, no way. And this reminds us again of the cover. What is on the cover near the dead center? The Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland, right with this reunion, and most of those leaders were there. So it definitely reminded us of the cover, so I think this reunion itself might have also been hinted to at on the cover. In addition to the cat extra driving it home that this is that. Then today on the 17th, the United States Air Force completed the 3rd development flight test of a non-nuclear version of the nuclear gravity bomb that they've been developing at the Tonopah Test Range in Nevada. Basically, it's a nuclear bomb, but they just tested it without a nuclear warhead. This time they're just testing the dropping ability of it. This was the 3rd test. The first test took place in July. Now, it's interesting that it kind of brings up some imagery to mind. It starts ringing some bells. It's also interesting that this is the 2nd picture that they released of it. They released very few pictures, but of all the pictures of the drop, they released this picture right before it hit the ground. And none others that I could find from the event. At the coloring and the angle and where it is above the ground, does that remind you of anything that we've been looking at lately? Most definitely. It definitely reminded me of the arrows. I mean, even similar in coloring, and the tail fins are very similar too. Again, I can't say that it is, but this strongly, as soon as I saw it, whoa, that definitely reminds me of the magazine cover arrows. Still undecided about the arrows. I don't think it's pointing to the 13th. I really don't see any key that tells you how you could rearrange it. And the decimal points are important. You can't just throw them away and arrive at the numbers that you want. Something else that needs to be considered when looking at the arrows is all the other artwork and illustrations is done in a completely different style, such as the turtle and all the other things. Unless it's an actual photo or historical clip art like Alice in Wonderland there, all the other stuff is done in pen and ink with watercolor fill. It's very illustrative style. But these arrows are unique and different. Why? Why are they done vector style? Something to think about. On the 13th, as mentioned in the press, that director Ridley Scott announces the sequel to his previous film, Prometheus. This new movie was going to be called Alien Covenant. And that should ring some bells too as well. But we've been looking a lot at this symbolism and the messaging of Prometheus over the past few days, how it's really been thick. So it's interesting that this was mentioned on the 13th. Prometheus, name dropped. Major media, major director, Prometheus, the one who brought fire, hearkens to Lucifer. And that was on the same day, by the way, that the movie The 33rd was released, which was produced by the Phoenix Productions. On the 12th, there's a TV series called Heroes Reborn. And it's a 13 episode series that is currently airing every Thursday. And it's about humans with special supernatural powers. Kind of reminds me of the fallen angels and the Nephilim offspring. And all the characters have their own special powers that they can do. A lot more symbolism here too as well. We gotta keep moving. Then today on the 17th, the first trailer for The Gods of Egypt was released. And it's produced by Summit Entertainment, a Lionsgate company. And we looked at them just a couple of days ago. Lionsgate. It's all about referencing the Ishtar Gate from Babylon, pulling a lot of symbolism from there. The gateway to the gods, a dimensional portal. A lot of references there. Lionsgate. But then it's also produced with Mystery Clock Cinema. They're bringing in time too as well. Way back in April, we started bringing it out with our Time Stone in the Bible series of how time manipulation, altering time-space with toroidal fields, opening dimensions, all that is part involved with opening the bottomless pit that Revelation talks about. Definitely watch our video on that. So it shouldn't surprise us that these movies are coming out tying the two together. Dimensional portals, time changing, in connection with Lucifer, Prometheus, Ishtar's Gate, all that. So then the trailer opens up with this scene. And right away, if you've been following along with our videos, you instantly recognize it sets the stage right away with the two pillars, very prominent red, emphasizing the human aspect of it, but the dimensional portal. And then also it starts with a male figure in the center with an obelisk, a huge obelisk, conveniently lined up right in line with him, hinting and reinforcing the phallus symbolism of an obelisk. This trailer alone is loaded with heavy symbolism. And also, this one here hints at the Tower of Babel. Notice that they have it under construction, reaching up to the heavens. You can't see the top. So this is also referencing the Tower of Babel, which is what they're trying to do with going through the two pillars, going to the new Atlantis, opening a dimensional portal. It's our modern version of the Tower of Babel. And we've seen that same exact symbolism in the Alice trailer just a couple of days ago. Why are they laying it on so thick right now? Because they are apparently about to try something. But the trailer starts off with the narration, "Ages have passed since the gods walked among us." And that harkens right back to the Tower of Babel time, and also before the flood time, when that happened, when the fallen angels were with mankind and led them astray, and they had their offspring and had their half gods, the demigods, creatures with supernatural powers. They are getting ready to come back. That's what the Bible tells us. When the bottomless pit is opened, those fallen angels are coming out. Apollyon is one of them. And then, of course, the movie's about Egypt, so there's a lot of theming, but it gives them another, in context, pushing the concept of the pyramids. And then they have this one figure who instantly reminded me of Lucifer. They even have him falling in flames, just like Prometheus, that we've been looking at a lot lately too. And then, this is so blatant. They rip out the guy's eyes in this fight. This is a direct reference to Apollyon. And that's what this character goes through the whole movie. He's blinded and he has to use the Eye of Horus, which we looked at a couple days ago. That's what's above the pyramid on the dollar bill. That's what's referenced. And even Katy Perry makes heavy reference to that. They've been pushing this a lot this year. In their Dark Horse song, a lot of symbolism in that. And then, of course, in our halftime show, that's what she acted out there, as the return of Prometheus. Returning through the doorway opened up by the particles and all that. We talked about that in our Time Stone in the Bible video. She even dressed apart. Getting back to the trailer, they even show the half-man, half-fallen angel offspring as giants. And that's what the Bible talks about. The offspring of the fallen angels, when they had relations with human women, their offspring were giants. And they reference that in this movie too as well. Clear reference to Apollyon again. Then some more narration. This one character says, "You know what is waiting." She's talking in reference to when he's about to return to try to take his place again, which is the exact same thing we've been seeing with the Star Wars Awakening theme. The return to try to retake power. So this character says, "You know what is waiting." Set has an army behind him. But so he has an army. And when he comes out of the bottomless pit, what does the Bible tell us? He's coming with an army with him. And so this trailer is literally telling you, oh, it's so crazy. But then it goes on to say, in addition to the army, he has gods with him, the demigods, are coming. He has beasts with him, crazy freaks that we haven't seen that are literally from the pit of hell. Read Revelation chapter 9. That describes it all, even describes what the creatures look like. And then goes on to list demons are also coming with him too. Yeah, that's pretty much what Revelation says is coming. And then they have a bunch more footage. And then they end with this shot of Gods of Egypt, the title scene. And if you've seen our Time Certain in the Bible video, this will remind you of a tokamak reactor, which is technology used today that creates intense toroidal fields, but a lot of people suspect it's also involved with time manipulation if you crank it up and work it just right. And they've been using this exact same technology in the Star Trek movies. They use it in set designs a lot too, and a lot of other ones. But it's interesting that in context of everything else they've been showing in this trailer, they end with showing a very strong hearken to the technology that they'll be using to open the gateway, to go through the two pillars, to open the door for Apollyon so he can come in with his army, with his demons, with his creatures. Revelation 9:11, and they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. The Bible says these characters are real and they are about to come onto the scene. The tribulation period is not going to be anything like the Left Behind books. Throw them away, please. You're going to be doing a huge disfavor to anybody during the tribulation. You're just going to confuse them and run them down the wrong path. It's going to be far worse. The tribulation is going to be more supernatural than natural. The Bible talks and tells you plainly the nations are going to be perplexed at everything. It's just going to blow them away. And partly the Left Behind books are part of it because they're misleading people and setting them up for false expectations. Okay, back to what else happened today. Well, they also released 2 posters. One silver, one gold. And those are references to the Golden Gate portal and the Silver Gate portal that they reference a lot to as well. And there is a reason why a lot of movies that deal with time, they often like to include the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco in them, because that's a symbolic hint to one of their dimensional portholes that they call the Golden Gate. You often see it destroyed in a lot of movies, especially Star Trek, especially the ones that deal with time. The Golden Gate, the Silver Gate, both of these are about to be used again in bringing that back to fallen angels. And notice the tags that they put the subtext on both these posters. The golden one says, Gods of Egypt, all of creation is at stake. Yeah, that's pretty much summing up the tribulation. A second poster, Gods of Egypt, all of heaven is at war. If you're familiar with Revelation, read chapter 12. That's exactly what's going to be happening. Satan knows it's all going to be happening. And he's telling his disciples this is about to happen. Revelation 12, the war in heaven day, where the angels are battling. There's going to be a lot at stake down here on earth. And there's going to be a war in heaven too as well. And this is one of the most blatantly in-your-face trailers I've seen so far. This is insane. And then they end the trailer with coming soon. Yeah. From everything we've seen so far with the signaling, how it's been increasing in intensity, I think that they might be trying something pretty soon with CERN too as well. CERN is just now starting their second batch of special physics runs at much higher power and collisions. So it looks like they are getting ready to try. They're trying right after, literally, they do all the signaling. They put out all the warnings, then they are starting to turn on the machine and starting to do stuff. They know something is special about this time. We need to be very vigilant and very sober. We really need to put aside any stupid distractions right now and be focused on where we should be in our life, our walk with Christ. Satan is very busy right now. Are we as Christians, are we busy? Are they putting us to shame? Sadly, for the most part, I think so. Looking back at the cover, there's a lot of different symbols that we've covered. But looking down in the lower left-hand corner, we see a drum set. And when we blow it up, we could see several distinctions about it. It references multiple things. First of all, you could see the American Stars and Stripes on the top drums, referencing, and it appears to reference the British invasion when the Beatles came to America. That's what it was nicknamed, the British invasion. So it seems to be saying this is related to the Beatles. But then also it has a guitar with what looks like a string broke on it, smashed through the skin on the drum, the main drum. Rock and roll and the guitars have a long association with the phallic symbol, so it shouldn't surprise us that they have that piercing through the skin of the drum, the circle. It's a depiction of a sex act, basically. It's an association with the Beatles and also the 50th. What is the 50th? Well, this is the 50th Jubilee year, which started at the Day of Atonement, just not too long ago. This is another time anchor pointing to this specific time. The World Rugby Cup, the Cricket All-Star Game, the Jubilee, all these are time anchors of letting them know all this symbolism is going to be happening right in this window of time around here. And we see it all happening now too. That's what we've been chronicling. If you have the time, please go back and watch all the videos in our Situation Room where we've been covering it piecemeal. Something else to point out. On that guitar, you'll notice a very specific way that it is painted up. That is a reference to something that happened recently, and that reinforces why we understand it to be in context of the Jubilee. On June 4th, 2012, McCartney performed at the Queen's Diamond Jubilee, and he unveiled a special edition Union Jack version of his signature Hofner violin bass guitar. So not only is this drum set linked to the Beatles, but it's also linked to the Jubilee to reinforce both of these are true. Continuing with the Beatles though, you may remember the hat that we looked at the other day that referenced the pyramid, the Kate Moss, the Atlantis, and on the pyramid was a special technique, a special projection technique called Pepper's Ghost. And that's a projection technique long used in theater to simulate ghosts and whatnot. Well, that should remind us of something in context with the Beatles, if you're familiar with their titles. They put out an album called Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and this was the cover of it. And this is where the inspiration for the cover of The Economist came from. And if you're familiar with the Beatles and have done some serious research on them, you don't have to look too far to find out that they were deeply involved with the occult. Deeply. And there's a lot of very disturbing symbolism on this cover that they're giving nods to the occult. And this whole thing is set up to be a message, to be a tell. They are deeply involved in the occult. In the upper left-hand corner, they have Aleister Crowley, called the most wickedest man on earth. He's on there for a reason. They're gathered around a mock grave, which again reminds us of ghosts, the days of the dead, which is where we're all now. There's so much symbolism going on right now. The enemy has some serious deep programming going on within decades, building to this time. They know something about this time, and they are going to be trying something during this time. When we look back at just what has happened over just the past 2.5 weeks, the past 18 days, a lot of symbolism from the cover has been coming together, nailing that this is the time in conjunction with news events happening too as well. While we're here, on the 31st, which was Halloween, that was when that Russian plane crash and bomb went off. And I strongly believe that was a sacrifice on Halloween. There's always going to be a sacrifice on Halloween, a major one. Then we jump forward to the 13th. If you've seen my previous videos, I pointed out that the 13 days before Halloween and the 13 days after Halloween are regarded as important in the occult too. So I wasn't too surprised, sadly, that on the 13th was the events in Paris. But then we've seen a lot happen within this context, building to where we are now. When we look at just within a 2 weeks' time, literally, we have movies about relating to Phoenix, coming from the underground, coming from Hades, the gods of Egypt returning, a movie sequel to Prometheus, a series about heroes being reborn, also Star Wars, The Force Awakens, all of this happening at the same time. This is not coincidence. The same message through different venues. This is not coincidence. He is getting his disciples ready, and he's been building up. And the Bible tells us that there will be birth pangs. It will build and build and build and build right till the end. And if you're watching and paying attention, you will see it. But he did say a lot of people are going to be caught unawares because they don't care. They don't may bother with studying this stuff because it disrupts their mental fantasy of their imaginary world that they live in and their dreams for the future. It is a dream because you got to be asleep to realize it. But 5 major media points just within these past few days pointing to the exact same theme. An awakening and a return. But that's not it. Over these past few days, there have been 15 references just to Apollyon, in just the past 13 days, time period. 15. That's just to Apollo and Apollyon. That's not counting the references to Lucifer, the references to Prometheus, the references to Phoenix, and not including the references to time or the fallen angels. That's just Apollyon in the past 13 days. This is not coincidence. He's strong messaging because he is about to step onto the scene, and he's using all these channels to reach his disciples And they are excited because they've been told a lie about all this, but it's to get them ready. It's to get them ready, and they are excited to see all this stuff. It's for them. Christian, we are supposed to watch and keep an eye on the enemy of what they're up to. With everything that's been coming unveiled during the last few days, there's very strong, blatant messaging. At the same time, we could see an unrestraining of Satan too as well. He is doing more. And you could see the world events in Syria and Russia. You can see the geopolitical events quickly coming unraveled and really setting up for a perfect storm if you've been studying them well lately. The restraining hand is being lifted. Are we living in light of that? Are we paying attention? Time is very short. We don't know how much longer we will have before he's totally unrestrained, but it looks like it is not long at all. The window to serve God is growing smaller and smaller. Do not put off what you need to do for Christ. With everything that's going on in the world right now, Satan is going to try to use fear to distract you from what you should be doing. Don't pay attention to politics at all. Just tune it completely out. Don't pay attention to the political candidates, what they're saying on social media. Don't care about what they're saying about this or that, even ISIS and refugees. What you should be focused on right now is you. The safest place for you to be is in the center of God's will, where your relationship with God is where it's supposed to be, where you can hear Him, where you are close enough to hear what He wants, when sin is out of your life, when your prayers are not bouncing off the ceiling, when you are so close to God that you can hear His heartbeat. That is the safest place to be. When Peter walked on the water, he was a lot safer on the water standing next to Jesus than he would have been back in the boat. Don't be content to sit in the boat and just be content and go with the flow that everybody else is doing. No, this is a time where God calls us to be zealous. That's what He told the Laodicean church. Be zealous. With everything else going on right now, now's the time to kick it in a high gear. Forget and just cast off everything that is keeping you from God, from reading God's Word. Everything that is keeping you from God is your enemy. You have to treat it like your enemy. You can't say you love God if you don't hate your enemy. You cannot hold both. But when we get to the point where we say, I hate sports, and I hate media, and I hate all these other things that are holding me back, you will not go forward for God in victory until you hate and you cut off and you cast off and you purify off and you trim off and you set aside those stumbling blocks that are holding you back from being victorious. I want you to be victorious. I want you to be close to God. I want you to press toward the mark. Now, during this time in the darkest days, is when you need to shine even brighter. May God give you the strength and wisdom that you need so that you can serve Him first and highest above all. Maranatha.